God has brought us together today to give us a special call to conversion. And the examples in all the readings of today are well aligned with this call to conversion, a conversion that will help us to have a better way of looking at life. Moses, when he saw an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew, got enraged and wanted justice to be done. He immediately intervened and killed the Egyptian and was buried in the sand. And this was the reason why he fled into the desert, because Egyptians began looking for him. While in the palace of the Pharaoh, he had learned to look at life and to do things his own way. And when he saw a situation of injustice, he acted in a rash way, thinking it was the best way to bring about justice. When they looked for him to be killed and fled into the desert, while there in the desert, his thinking about life became refined. After this refinement, God is calling him to intervene in bringing about justice for his people. And that's why he introduces himself today, as we have heard in the first reading. He had chosen to go in the desert and live a poor, quiet, and undisturbed life after creating a mess in Egypt. And from that moment, I think he vowed never to get involved in any other people's matters and to keep away from all trouble. Could be even some among us here are thinking, oh, for that situation, I better keep my big mouth shut. I don't even want to look that side. That's their business, not my business. So you flee from situations as Moses did in order not to be inconvenienced. God will catch up with you as he caught up with Moses. After the brutal action, he went into the desert to be refined in attitude and in his view about life. And he knew what was going on in Egypt. So when God introduces the subject of going to liberate the people, we have heard Moses not so much resistant. He knew the situation. And now, he begins to see things according to the mind of God, and he asks him, what shall I tell them? He's working consultatively with God. I think this is what we should also do. If we work in consultation with God, then we shall have a better view of life and be able to provide solutions that are not brutal, as it was in the case of Moses in the first instance. Jesus in the gospel is also attending to a situation almost like that. As he was preaching, they come to tell him of the sad incident of the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with the blood of their sacrifices. When Pilate came to know that Galileans had gathered in the temple to offer sacrifice, he suspected they might start a revolt. So he sent soldiers to kill them immediately. He was a paranoid character. They killed them, and people got furious. They wanted a quick fix for this situation. Moses got a quick fix for the situation that led him in trouble. Now these Jews are telling Jesus about the situation, maybe thinking Jesus would tell them, go and pay back, go and get even. He's telling them that your view of the situation is wrong. If you do not repent, you shall perish as they have perished. Because violence with violence leads to more trouble. So Jesus is telling them to repent of their rage, of their revenge, of their brutal convictions toward the action of Pilate. So if our view of life does not change, we might also perish, because violence breeds violence. Lent is a good time for us to review our mind, our attitudes toward life, and change them in accordance to the teaching of the gospel. In every circumstance of life, this is what is expected. So the call to conversion is a call for us all to a change of heart, to begin saying things and things about life according to the mind of God. Jesus himself quoted the people who were killed by a tower, near Siloam. He asked them, do you think that those who died were sinners? He said, no. It was just a catastrophe that happened that couldn't be blamed even on God. But if such situations happen and we say they have died because of their sins, then we are in trouble. We better repent of that quick fix. Sometimes we put generic answers about situations, answers that do not apply at all. And at times we begin pointing fingers. Look at them. You see, I told you. That kind of attitude has to change. We have to repent of everything in that line of pointing, accusing fingers, because it is sinful. In the second reading, Peter is also teaching the people in Corinth who are thriving on a spirituality of false certainty. They thought that their ancestors in faith had many privileges. They walked under the leadership of Moses. They drank water from the rock. They ate manna from heaven. And they walked under the cloud during the day. At night, they were guided by a pillar of fire. So if God did that much for them, naturally it would follow even for the generation of Christians. St. Paul is telling them, forget. Because even those who walked under those circumstances, none of them entered the promised land, because they looked at the graces of God and began staggering left and right. None of them entered the promised land. So it is the case with us. To say that I am baptized, which is like the Israelites crossing the Red Sea, to say that I take Holy Communion, which is like drinking from the rock or eating manna, to say I'm confirmed, which is also like the people who walked under the cloud in the desert, doesn't mean exactly and naturally that you must qualify to enter heaven. That is a false assumption. In order to attain heaven and holiness, we have to work and put our lives in total agreement with what the gospel teaches. So, false conclusions within me, false assumptions and certainties within me might lead me to miss the life of the kingdom. So Christ is saying again here, repent of false certainties. So today, the Sunday is inviting us to review our thinking and attitudes about life, especially our spiritual life. And make sure that our spiritual life, my spiritual life, is well aligned with the values of the gospel, that I see things according to the mind of God. And this is what Moses has done in the first reading, seeking what he should say to the people from God. Jesus is telling us to repent in order to avoid perishing. And St. Paul in the second reading is inviting us to avoid false certainties. May God help us to walk the path of uprightness with the better views of life, bringing everything we have in the context of the gospel. The Lord be with you.